there's new chairs needed in city council chambers.
We heard that.
And Councilman Freeman needs a new mic. It still works. All right.
And we're at the end of this process.
And we are at the end of this process, so Mr. Fricker, proceed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I begin, I want to briefly introduce the various managers that we have in the Finance Department. So sitting behind me, we have Brian Linder of our Utilities Business Office, Brian Riemann of our Utilities Business Office, Arpek Shaw, he's our Tax Commissioner, Kim Guzman is our Accounting Manager, Kim Heron is our Purchasing Agent, Cheryl Bryson is our Treasurer, Cindy Donnell, to my left, is our Audit and Budget Manager, and of course, who needs no introduction, Diane Miller-Dawson, our Finance Director. So I'm going to briefly go through some of our goals and accomplishments from last year and for this year. One of the things I'll touch on, just kind of overall for finance, is that we are going to start looking this year at a number of system upgrades. They probably will not happen in 2019, but due to everything we've experienced over the last couple months, and also just a general need we've had for a long time with some kind of outdated applications, we're going to start looking at upgrading potentially our Banner financial system, which we've had since 1997, our PeopleSoft HR payroll system, which we've had since 1999. We are also looking at upgrading our utility billing software. We're looking at that right now. And then also our special assessment system. We are hoping to partner with the county there because they are upgrading their real estate tax software where assessments ties in very closely with that. So we're hoping to kind of piggyback on their project and be able to have a module that will work for our assessment collections.
You say upgrade, are you talking whole new vendor, whole new company, or just, okay, PeopleSoft version, yada, yada, 0.3?
Potentially a whole new company.
Okay.
And, one of the things that would be nice is, a lot of the vendors now, so currently we have two separate vendors. We have our Banner, which is mainly a higher ed package that's used for our financial system, and it's primarily used by colleges and universities. Now, there are a few local governments, with the other primary one being the Summit County also uses Banner, but both the city and the county are looking to potentially move to a new system. So what we're hoping to do is get a combined system so that those two, both financial and HR payroll, will they'll be on the same platform and they'll integrate more closely than what we have now. So I'll go through some of our goals and accomplishments. So in our accounting division, we did do some PeopleSoft projects this year, and one of the main things that we did was we set up a self-service module in PeopleSoft that lets employees go in and print out their pay stubs and their W-2s. So that is fully rolled out now. It does save us some time from having to print out 1,800 or even more than that when you count the part-time employees, 1,800 weekly payroll, advice documents, so people can go in, they can enroll in that and go in whenever they want and look at those documents, get their W-2s. The other thing I would mention is that I'm sure all of you noticed that your W-2s, I think, were distributed, I think they came in the first week in January this year. So our accounting manager, got that out very early this year, so I'm sure the whole city is appreciative of that.
So people have a choice of electronic or paper?
Correct. You have a choice of either getting a paper copy or just enrolling in this self-service module through PeopleSoft, where you can go log in with your network ID and print out either your W-2 or your weekly pay stub whenever you want. And I think it saves all the history, as I recall. Yeah.
percentage of our employees have chosen to get their weekly?
So when I send the file to the vendor, I tell him how many I need a file copy of, so I get a file copy of everyone's, and then how many get mailed. And there was about 450 different, so about 450, just under 450 employees, or prior employees, because then they had service and then left. But we had about 450 that did not get mailed. So that's a nice chunk.
Okay, good. Great, thank you.
Okay, in our audit and budget division, once again, for the 34th consecutive year, we did receive the Certificate of Achievements for Excellence in Financial Reporting for our CAFR, which is our financial statement document that we publish every year. In 2018, we had a new auditor for the first time in 13 years. So we had the state auditor prior to 2018. We had the state auditor for 13 straight years. We had a financial or an accounting firm called Plant Moran. They're the ones that were assigned to do the audit, and we think that things went very well with them. They are currently, working right now on the 2018 audit. So. During 2019, we will be looking at, I'm not going to go through all these, but in the goals and objectives, there's a number of financial accounting updates that we have to implement into our financial statements, and it's very in-depth. I'll read one of them. Accounting and financial reporting for post-employment benefits other than pensions. So that's, those are the kinds of things that that Cindy has to look at, has to read up on, and figure out how we need to incorporate those requirements into our financial statements. Okay, in our income tax division, as we talked about a little bit in the fall when we came and looked for a new credit card arrangement. So we are going to roll out, hopefully in the next couple months, actually I think it's slated for June, where we'll be able to take online credit card payments in our tax division again. So we're hoping to have that up and running for this year's e-filing season. We didn't make that deadline, unfortunately. Part of it was due to the cyber attack, but we do intend to have that up and running by mid-year and be able to take credit card payments for our online income tax filings.
What, I know we're not in the numbers yet. What does that cost us a year?
Well, so we are going to pass the cost on to the taxpayer.
Okay, so if it's a 2%.
So on the tax side, it is yes, it's like a 2% of the of the actual payment. Yes.
All right, thank you.
The other thing that's happening is that we're monitoring a number of changes that are happening at the state level that are concerning to cities in terms of collecting municipal income tax. So the state has implemented a number of changes. One of which is they are now trying to get businesses to enroll in their system to pay their net profit tax, and that system has been plagued with problems. So, businesses can choose to opt into that system, but it has been plagued with problems. They're also making a number of changes in the tax code that potentially would reduce our income tax revenues that we receive in the city. So there is a group of tax commissioners from throughout the state that that are meeting and monitoring the changes that the state is proposing to make. So we're staying on top of those changes, but there's some potentially
losses?
Yeah, there's some potential reductions in our tax collections that might result from the actions that the state legislature takes.
So have they been lying to us that they're going to eventually make us whole by giving us our money back? the people that paid them, they are saying they're going to give it back to us?
Right, I mean, it all gets passed through, but the state, what is the percentage? I believe they are proposing to take a percentage of the tax that they collect.
For administrative costs?
Correct, yes.
And no one has asked them to do that?
We've been talking about this for years.
That's what was put into the language that they put through the legislature.
Mr. Fusco?
No, where's DeWine at on it?
Yeah, so it's 0.5%.
0.5%.
Yeah. Which I think was down, so I think that there was some lobbying that was done to reduce that amount, because it was originally at like 1% or even more than that.
Yes, during the, Art Prekshaw, Tax Commissioner, during the negotiation process, it started out that they were asking for a 1% administrative fee.
It's a nice way to make some money that nobody asked you to, a job no one asked you to perform. It's terrible.
Okay. So we are monitoring that, and we are implementing the changes that they do, if they are passed, and we do have to implement those changes, so we are doing that. In our purchasing division, one of the things we are looking to do is we have had a storeroom for a number of years that actually used to stock items, and with these online systems where you can order office supplies and have them delivered the next day, we have been basically phasing that out. So the storeroom is essentially 90% eliminated now, and we're looking to kind of complete that. The other thing that we've been doing is setting up an online portal with our main vendor for just office supplies, so that we can have, you can enroll city employees with like some kind of an ID number that's tied to a cost center. So all of this can be done through the website of our vendor. We don't have to have someone from the storeroom intervene to do anything to process those orders. It just goes directly to the vendor. Those supplies get delivered directly to that office, and it's just much more efficient to do it that way.
Does that affect the purchasing agent's position at all?
I'm sorry?
Does that affect the purchasing agent's position at all that we have here?
No.
Okay.
No. One of the other things that we are starting right now is that we will be working with the Urban League to focus on bringing in more minority business vendors. So we have a new contract in place. I think we're just kind of ironing out the details right now. I think Diane can provide some different data points on that.
I don't know if you have any questions, but we're actually working with the Akron Minority Business Assistance Center through the Urban League. They're going to help us get more minority vendors. They're going to work with the vendors to help them determine how to bid on our contracts. That's been like one of the issues. They're also going to work with the vendors to get them banked if they need banking, those types of things. So we're excited about the new arrangement.
So who's going to, one of the major concerns that we heard from some of those individuals that have been trying to work through the CSO project is managing the paperwork. A lot of these people just don't have those skills, and that has been a real key concern. So when we asked Urban League about that, they indicated that they were not being paid to do that work. So we're going to change the contract?
Yeah, this is another contract with the Urban League. It's one of the things that we keep hearing from our council, as well as it's a mayor's priority, is we need to figure out how to get more minority vendors in here bidding on our work. I mean, it's important to the city, so we need to make sure we're preparing them so they're able to be successful. So the Urban League is going to help us be more successful. I mean, Kim Herron has done some outreach efforts last year. She got a couple of new minority businesses, but again, Kim has a full-time job, so we thought we needed the Urban League to make sure we are focusing on getting minorities bidding on our projects.
Okay.
Okay, our Treasury Division, which is comprised of, so there's the treasury side, which handles the cash investments and the payment of our debt service, and then we also have the special assessment side that I talked about a little bit, that we are potentially going to partner with the county on some new software there. But they were successfully able to implement all of the additional assessments for our new issue 4 resurfacing. So we added, a lot of different parcels that we are assessing for as part of that new issue 4 resurfacing project, and they were able to do that with 2 people. So our assessments division is down to 2 people right now, so they did quite a job getting through all of that and being able to get those assessments processed. The other thing we're doing in Treasury, at all times we are monitoring and we're working with our banking partners to look for refunding savings opportunities on our debt issuances. So as you know, from time to time we bring you refunding bond issues to council. When there's opportunity to save on debt service, we look to take advantage of those opportunities, so we are looking for those right now.
It's the highest, maybe violating my own rules, what's the highest rate we have on a note right now, or a bond right now, would you say?
I'm going to guess there's probably some that are in the 4+% range, yeah. We,
Okay. Okay.
What's that rate that we try to get the AAA on? What is that, the rating? Is that bond rating? Where are we now?
We have different levels.
right, so our primary bond rating agency that we work with is S&P. We are currently rated AA- with S&P. So we've been pretty stable there for the past several years.
And the highest is AAA?
Highest is AAA, right.
Okay.
Mr. Neal?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I want to make sure I understand on the blended rate. If it's a blended rate of 5, so that means that sometimes it's above 5, sometimes. So those are the ones we try to refinance before they hit the higher portion or percentage rate?
It's like within a specific issue, so let's say the bond is 20 years, 1 year, because of each individual issue for that year, 1 year they do 3%, 1 year they do 6%.
Are we, but is that like,
So for that entire issue, the rate on average is 5%.
okay, so it's not like we can take that one and then if we find something before that 6% year kicks in, where we can refinance that one? Or
No, we can.
we can?
Yeah.
And so are those the ones we target? It almost make me, get ready to tell my personal business, but you know when you get a credit card and they give you that 0% interest, try to keep on mind before that 0% kicks out to either pay it off or roll it over. So, I mean, are those the ones we target?
Yeah, so basically the bankers that we work with in terms of doing our bond refinancings, they have very sophisticated software that looks at where the current rates are for each year of maturity going out into the future, and they will identify which maturities it makes sense to refund. So we could have, 10 years of bonds outstanding, and they may come back to us and say, it makes sense to refund the ones that mature in the 6th, 7th, and 8th year, but not any of the other ones. So, it's very sophisticated. There's some very sophisticated software that they use to calculate what the best savings plan is in terms of refinancing bonds.
Okay, that's cool, because 5% doesn't sound that much, but when you talk about the size of some of our bonds, that's a lot of money. So, yeah, that's good to know. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then our utilities business office, we are currently looking at an upgrade path for our utility software. So we've had this Enquesta program for a number of years. So we're trying to determine whether we upgrade that package to the next level or if we go with a different package. So we are currently looking at that right now.
We use Itron for what? Just the reading of the meters? Can we do any more with that software?
It's part of what, water distribution at the meter shop, they're looking into an AMI system rather than the drive-by system that we have right now.
Now, what's the AMI? What's,
It's an automatic, meter integration where you can get reads, you can get them minutes, hourly.
oh, so you don't have to go to the neighborhoods and,
Correct, they automatically send them in with fixed point
okay.
radio frequency.
With the AMI, can they tell, like, say, within a matter of an hour, wow, something's going on at this house?
Correct, within a matter of
Oh,
Great.
depending upon, the length of time they ask for the read to be sent back in. Yeah, check leaks and so forth.
So
How
Mr.
much does it
Jones
cost?
has used 2,000 gallons of water between now and 3 o'clock, there's probably a problem somewhere.
Correct, there'd be an alert sent, and then there'd be a way of trying to notify them, some type of system would need to be set up.
How much is it? I mean, it's much more expensive than the other one?
Than what we're looking at now, but that's really within water distribution, it is, a little bit more expensive, but the benefits
Outweigh the,
outweigh, correct?
sure.
Especially for large manufacturers, they'd be able to see what they're constantly using.
Sure.
Homeowners with vacant properties, if you have a first bite, you'd be able to find out right away rather than days later when you go over there. and there's
Well, that's
water
great, yeah.
let out.
Okay, thank you.
One of the issues that we've had is, the issue of folks, $500 water bill this month, what? And everything I understand from the AMI, that it can help resolve issues like that.
Correct, and the customer would even have, depending upon the type of portal that's used, they would be able to access that information, they'd be able to see it also. What they're using and how they're using it.
Good.
And I've let us get so far off the track, I apologize, but we'll want to hear more about that. I know it's not something that we directly speak into or necessarily, but I think every council has a vested interest in that as we're dealing with people, what we do in the future.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
To your point, and that's where it would be good to kind of take a look at how we're utilizing this smart technology and how it impacts the overall budget, because I heard you say it may cost more initially, but if you don't have to have someone drive down the street, every month, I would imagine that we would recoup that, the return on that investment would be pretty quick to where the chart would flip and then it would start saving us money. But I say that so that we can kind of get an overall arching look at how all this stuff should be syncing together and saving the city money and helping us provide better service to our citizens. Some kind of way we need to see that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, and with that, we have the numbers. Since Mr. Hardy went through the pages, I'll briefly go through the various divisions of the finance department. We do operate in a number of different funds, so page 13-1 is our finance director's office. We do not have any staffing changes this year. We did have, you'll see an interfund service charge that happened last year. That was one of those advances that we talked about. So the general fund advanced some money out to other funds. So that's what that amount was. We also had in our 70 category, we had a little bit of expense due to the cell tower sale. We had some legal work that had to be done associated with that. So that's why that amount in that 70 category went up a little bit. Page 13-2 is our workers' comp reserve fund. So this is where we pay a consultant to manage our workers' comp claims. We pay the claims themselves, and then we pay some premiums to the Bureau of Workers' Comp. So that number for this year is about $2.2 million for our workers' comp fund. 13-3 is we appropriate $100,000 each year. We have not had to use that in several years. It's just something that we appropriate every year in case there's any settlements that need to be paid out. 13-4 is our audit and budget division. Again, no staffing changes here. This is where the expense of the outside auditor would show up.
Okay.
We do have one contractual accounting contract, so we have an account that's giving us some assistance with preparing our CAFR, since we are down one staff member right now in the audit and budget division.
Yeah, obviously on 13.5, there's going to be the question about the other expenditures. Line 70.
I'll let Cindy explain that one.
Okay, there was actually a misposting. Within accounting, it's accounting and payroll. So payroll has a separate fund, but it hit this fund instead of the payroll fund, so that
Right.
the
You're going to see
payroll
it on
fund
the
will
next
reimburse
page.
it.
Yeah, the kind of the reverse of this. So on the next page is our payroll fund, and you see that going up, roughly $600,000, and that's to return that money back for that misposting.
It was corrected in January.
Okay.
13.7, this is our purchasing division. No staffing changes here. The primary expenses here are, the supplies that are purchased for like toner and paper supplies. We also have the advertising that we do for bids in the Beacon Journal, and then our postage cost is charged here. So those are the primary things that are charged to the purchasing budget.
Mr. Neal?
That's for line 1307?
Correct, yes.
So we're expecting on doubling that, is that it? Or am I reading it right? Am I on the right line? No, okay, that's the line above it, I believe. I want to make sure I'm looking at the right line. Okay, no, I'm sorry, it was the line above it. I think you explained that one.
Okay. 13.8 is our income tax collection operation. Again, no staffing changes here. We do anticipate, there's a couple larger refunds that we know about already, so we did increase the refunds line item a little bit here to account for that. Page 13-9, this is a fund that our Treasury Division manages. By state law, if there is a fire on a property in the city of Akron, 2/15 of the insurance proceeds are sent to the municipality, and that's so that you don't have property owners walk away from, if it's a low dollar value house, a lot of times property owners would just walk away, leaving this blighted, fire burned out structure. So, so they send us a portion of the insurance proceeds in case that happens, and then we have funds to actually demolish that structure or secure it.
This is the first I've ever heard of that. You said, what was the percentage?
So for every $15,000 of loss, we get $2,000. Yeah. And then so we either, we turn those funds when, the repairs have been made and everything, so we return those back to the property owner, or in some cases, we actually use those to fund the demolition of that property.
Okay. Mr. Neal?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was going to be my question. How many people do walk away, and what's the percentage that we actually do return, back to folks? Because sometimes I want to make sure, does that sometimes get taken care of through our regular demo program? And the reason why I'm asking, because there was a house just outside my ward. That house was torched, and it sat for about 8 years. So if we got insurance money on it.
I know there are some that the fire department can declare that it be raised immediately at the scene if it's so far gone that it's a certainty that it cannot be inhabited. The fire department can declare that those be raised. Then there's some that they really are too far gone, but it's not at the level where the fire department declares that. So a lot of those, we do end up demolishing, if that property owner walks away.
Off the top of your head, do you say we have like a 95, 80, 85% where the program works exactly the way it's supposed to, or do some people
I don't have a
forget that we
percentage.
have
We can look, maybe over a couple-year period and see in terms of the proceeds we've received and what we've returned,
Okay.
what that percentage is.
Thank you.
Yeah, so some of it is returned to the property owner, some of it gets transferred over to our Department of Neighborhoods if they actually perform the demolition. So we bring those funds over to pay for that demolition.
Okay, thank you. Didn't know that.
Page 13-10, this is our assessments division. You will notice that the current expenditures line is going up quite a bit. That's due to the SID ordinance that we just passed. So we have a new 5-year SID plan for the Downtown Special Improvement District. And what typically happens is at the beginning of the 5-year period, we get a number of the businesses that will prepay the entire amount in cash. So those assessments will come in, and then we pass those through to the Downtown Akron Partnership. So that amount will go up in this year higher than what it typically is. And then we also have an energy special improvement district that we did and had a heating and cooling project that happened down at Cascade Plaza, and those proceeds will come in and be passed through to pay off the bonds that they use to fund those improvements. Page 1311, this is our Treasury General Bond Payment Fund. So this is the portion of our property tax that comes in that is dedicated towards debt service and the staff in the Treasurer's office. So. Page 13-12, this is the Unclaimed Monies Fund. So when we have checks that the city writes that become stale dated, after a year, we reverse those checks and put the money into this fund. And then if the vendor does come in and claim that check, we will process that payment out of this fund. After 5 years, that money reverts to the general fund.
Mr. Neal?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. This is kind of in the same vein. Does the Finance Department keep record of that, not unclaimed fund, but what was it the Police Department had close to $1 million sitting over there? Do you guys follow that?
So that's the property room, the Police Monetary Evidence Fund, I believe is what it's called.
Is that somewhere in their records?
It's sort of, this really is more, so we have a list of all of our outstanding checks and the ones that are essentially deposited in this fund.
Yeah, I follow that, I understand that. I'm saying, do we have a way of monitoring that fund that's over at the police department that at one time, I think it was $1 million. I don't know where it sits now.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Where does it sit in any of these reports?
That was in the police budgets, so that was on Tuesday, I believe, that we covered that. Yeah, page 5-45. Yeah.
Page 5-45, property management evidence.
Right.
Right now, it's just showing what has a budget of 390, but what's actually in the account? Is that all that's in the account?
No, there's roughly $1 million in that account.
So this is what they anticipate coming in this year, or?
That is what we anticipate paying out this year. So a lot of it comes in and then is returned to whoever it was seized from, essentially. That's the bulk of those payments.
What I'd like to know, and I know this was a question, the question was, can we invest that do we have the right to invest any of that money? And if we
It is
do-
being invested as part of our pool cash, so
Okay.
it is being invested.
Okay, well, what I'd like to know is, that money that's invested, does the city have a right to spend that investment, or do we have to give it back to the people if they come back and claim it? And the reason why I'm asking, if a community has been impacted by these different things that led to those dollars being secured, I'd like to see us take the money from the investment, leave the principal, but the money from the investment, you'd be able to use that to provide a community benefit to those.
I believe that's what's happening anyways. That is what is happening. So we are not paying interest on those held monies.
Okay, so, but I mean, the investment dollars that are coming from the principal that's coming in, what are we doing with that?
Most of it goes to the general fund.
Okay. That right there we need to talk about, because that should go back to benefit the communities wherever the infraction happened. I think there should be some community benefit, especially, I mean, we see what's happening in our community now. We need some resources to be able to provide preventive services. And if that's where we can get it from, $1 million, if we're getting 5% on that, that would give us some money to do something with. So, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's something we can take a look at.
Page 13-13, this is just some small costs that we have as part of our treasurer's office for doing, like when people apply for taxi cab licenses, doing the background investigations and that type of thing. So it's just some minor costs associated with some of the licensing duties in the treasurer's office. Page 13-14 is the operating budget for our utilities business office. So we do have 2 less people that we are budgeting this year. So Mr. Blaylock left, and Dan Dyer, who was our enterprise accounting manager, left. So we have not filled those. We have not filled those jobs.
Who absorbed Mr. Blaylock's duties?
So that is currently both Brian Linder and Brian Riemann are kind of filling that role right now.
Congratulations.
Mr. Chair, we were paying them pretty well, it looks like.
What's that?
I said, based on the difference to savings, we were paying them pretty well.
Page 13-15, this is kind of our catch-all. It's called the Finance Citywide Administration. So there's no staff charged here. This is just a number of the contractual type obligations that the city as a whole must pay. For example, we have our victim assistance contract here. The indigent burials are charged here. The after-school program is charged here. The fees from the county collecting our property tax is charged here. So it's a number of just kind of procedural type expenses that the city has that don't really belong. They kind of belong to the city as a whole and not to one specific department. So this is kind of a catch-all for those types of items. 1360 is our community event budget within the JED fund. So there's really a couple things that hit here. One is the trolley, the trolleys that the city operates. Those costs are charged here, and then the summer events in the parks, that Heinz Pole Dance Festival. Those costs are charged to this budget. And we did see some savings in that. We're funding about $80,000 less than we were last year towards that program. And that was from changes they were able to make in the program, so they didn't need the city to make as large an investment in that program as what we have previously put in. Page 1317, this is where we pay the debt service on our CLC bonds. So That's the primary, what you see there in the debt service. That's what we pay for the school bonds. And then page 1318, it says Jed Copley, but really what this represents is the costs for all four of the JEDs, just the administration of the income tax collection, the tax sharing that we do with those JED districts, which you can see is going up. That's a result of issue 4.
Yeah, Akron passed issue 4, and it just helped Akron.
Correct, yeah.
It also helped those folks who are partners
Right.
with JED.
Yeah, so,
Remind them.
You're welcome.
right, yeah, so that's where those costs of administering the JED and passing those tax sharing amounts over to the 4 JED districts, that's where these are captured.
Mr. Chairman? To that point, regarding the JED, I remember we had asked a question during a planning meeting. I don't know if anyone remembers. When was the last time we adjusted our agreement to cover our cost of managing maybe it was infrastructure or whatever it is that we have to service in that area? It had been a long time. Do you remember that question? I don't know if you were part of that discussion. Do you remember that discussion?
I know that we do retain a 1% collection cost from the JED revenues that come in that we reimburse our tax fund for. So that cost of administering the income tax, sending out all the forms, a portion of the staff that works in the tax office, we capture 1% of the revenues generated from the JED districts to reimburse ourselves for that cost.
Yes, so thanks for that. But this, for some reason, and I'm looking at you, Mr. Fusco, hoping that you may remember this, because it was during a planning meeting. I think we were responsible for improving some of the infrastructure in the JED area. And the question came up, does our agreement with them cover the cost of us making the improvements? And maybe it was Mr. Antonucci who was looking at that, or Mr. Segedy. When we had the discussion, what we realized was it had been a long time since we had looked at that agreement to see if and we hadn't increased the fees to keep up with, I'll just say the cost of living index. I'll just use that term, not saying that may not be the right term.
I mean, I'm trying to think of what that could be. So all of the, the provisions of the contract, I don't think we've made any changes in,
Right.
Any type of rates of costs that we're capturing or anything like that.
We own
So-
the assets, and these are 99-year agreements, so
Right.
it probably wasn't related to water and sewer lines.
No, it wasn't. It was not necessarily just water and sewer. It's just like we assess people when we come through, the same people that are paying their tax, we assess them when we approve the streets. The question was asked that as far as assessment being passed over, because since it's in an area that, I know that was the gist of the conversation. When we have to go in there and repave or redo whatever it is we have to do, does the agreement that we have with them cover that cost? And to my understanding, it had been a while since we had looked at that number.
I don't think that's part of the JED agreement. And again, the JED agreements were 99-year agreements, but it doesn't speak to like resurfacing or that piece, if that's what you're referring to.
I believe it is, because I'll go back to the planning department and ask, that was the question. We have this agreement. Are we at least breaking even and not losing money because we have to maintain the upkeep? Pretty much, if I could use this example, like we talk about the city garages and that type of thing.
I mean, the only thing that we're maintaining in the JED districts are really the water and sewer lines that we put in as part of those agreements. So those are maintained by our water department. The JED customers, the water and sewer customers within the JED are paying, water and sewer rates, and we're, which is paying for that maintenance that we do.
So we're not doing anything when it comes to roads, when they need repaved? Because that, I do remember that was the thing, that was the question, because it was that the roads in that area had to be repaved.
There was one project, I think, that did come up, but you might need to talk to service and/or planning to figure out what the outcome was, because it was a state project, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, almost done, I think. Page 1319, this is our TIF fund, where so this basically goes to a few different areas. So some of the TIF was pledged back to companies when they did, economic development projects. Goodyear and Bridgestone are two examples of that. And then we give some of this to the schools. We've been paying some of our utilities with this money, and then we pay some debt service with this money too. So that's what. No. And so that is it for the finance department. There is one more page, and that's the final page in the budget book is actually the consolidated health budget. And what this primarily is the payment that we make to the Summit County Health Department. It's about a $4 million a year cost to the city, and that really hasn't changed.
Since 2011.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Neal.
Just a few things I'd like to get. One, since we left off with the health department piece, remember very vividly because that was right after the rash of shootings that took place at the end of the year, and most of us in the community came together looking at how to save some money. Find money to address the issue. And at that time, Mayor Pasquale talked about how we were going to save about $1 million a year by making this move. And I've asked this before, whenever we save, if we can identify, and I say that because we know that the gun violence, which has not decreased any at all, and is now all over the city, as we try to find money to address it, in this case right here, if we've identified how we've used that savings, and I know the state has changed, because that's another question. I know other communities, the county talked about how they were getting less money, how they were cutting staff and cutting support. Barberton's talking about not just because of Babcock and Wilcott, but how they're cutting. There's always going to be a challenge on funding, state funding. But my hope is to look at how we can identify to bring some dollars into the community. So if we can find out how we've addressed that savings over the 8 years, that would have been an $8 million savings for that right there. And then I'd also like to find out, I don't know if all of you got the email, there's some projects that council needs to look at. So if there are any, like the one fund that you talked about, that was $100,000 that's carried over that's not used, it's set there for a specific purpose, but it hasn't been.
Right, so it's a special revenue fund, which means it's designated for a very specific purpose.
Right, I understand. Now, legally, if it can't be adjusted and be used, the part that's adjusted out be used for something else, that's one matter. But if it can be adjusted and a portion of it be used for something else, then that's another matter. We'd like to see what funds there's carryover where things can be adjusted, so that when you see not even half the council was here, but so that when council talks about some of the things initiatives that we need to support the administration with or fund within ourselves to address some of the needs that we have, we know what funds we can look at. From the community needs, I think the dollars we can look at are the one that we just talked about with the police department, that finding out, getting a legal opinion if we can use the
So those have to be released by the courts in order to access those monies.
Okay. I understand. I know there's some restrictions, but if we can look at not the principal, but the investment dollars, if we have right to touch those, accessing, you know, those dollars.
Those are by our codified ordinances are going into the general fund.
Well,
you know.
but once they go into the general fund, then they can be distributed how we choose to have them distributed. The council and the
They go into the-
administration can...
right, they go into the general
discuss-
fund.
Right, can discuss how they can be distributed. Again, just getting those dollar amounts so that sometime between now and when this budget has to be approved, council can identify how we can cover some of the things that we're proposing.
Okay. I will say that those dollars are budgeted right now. Those are part of so the investment earnings that the general fund earns are programmed in on the revenue side for the general fund. So those dollars are funding everything that's been presented here
No, I
in the last 3 days.
I understand, but again, a budget shows the priority, the goals and objectives of the organization or whatever it is. I think we owe it to our constituents to show that we are putting some resources to address some of these needs that I know all of us are getting calls on. So that's why, you know, we need your help on, some of these things are glaring and can see them. We need your help to identify, because every year when we come to the budget, we see things where we had to expense dollars much greater than what we're looking at because of whatever reason it blew out the budget. So what we're trying to do is plan, identify some resources so that we can address some of the things that need to be addressed.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, thanks so much. Success now. Thank you, Diane, especially those that group was sitting there in the first row express. Yes. Thank you, Steve. Thank you very much. We need to have this passed by last Monday of the month?
Yes.
Okay.
It's required by state law that it's done by March 31st.
Okay, okay, very good. Well, we'll present then, this coming Monday with the hopes of getting passed, will that be the 25th? I believe.
25th is, yes.
Okay, very good, thank you.
No, thank you.
We will adjourn, thank you.